So this week we were asked to speak about masculinity within James Cameron's The Avatar, and we watched specific scenes that best depict and show the issue and the exemplification of a masculinity within film. But even without those specific scenes, from the very beginning of the film, Jake is emasculated due to his disability and his familial strife because his brother was just killed and he couldn't do anything to help. And he's trapped in this wheelchair, and not only is there an option for him to get better and be able to walk again, but he can't afford it, so he already feels like this sort of worthless being. When he's presented with the opportunity to take on the Avatar, of course he's going to say yes because it offers him a pair of legs but also strength again. So he takes that, but among of the scenes we watched, there's the learning to fly and then the Thanatar chase, but there's also other aspects of masculinity through relational issues, just like Jake and Neytiri and Grace and the Colonel are constantly butting heads, and then Sute and Jake, and then even Jake in his human form and Jake in his avatar form, because his avatar sort of acts as the hard body discussed in the Reagan Legacy article. And in Can Masculinity Be Terminated, there's a quote that goes, "Masculinity was largely transcribed through spectacle and bodies, with the male body itself becoming often the most fulfilling form of spectacle." But then that goes on to talk about the idea of external spectacle. So in the beginning, when you think of masculinity, you think of strong and muscular and tall and big in nature and in the like form of the human. But the idea of the external spectacle is things like car chases and action shots and explosions and the use of weaponry. So within Avatar, I would say this idea of the external spectacle is communicated through the Thanatar chase and through when Jake is learning to fly, because in the Thanatar chase, he's up against this big creature first, and Grace says, "Don't shoot, it's going to be a territorial threat, so just sort of stand your ground," to which he does, and then as soon as the Thanatar comes in, he just starts running around, and it's like this fight between the two of them and like their manhood. And then for the first flight, he has to prove himself as an avatar, and he's already got this like underlying issue with Sute because Sute is also after Neytiri in a romantic way. And there's this incredible shot where Jake and Neytiri lock eyes, and Neytiri smiles at him, and Sute catches it, and so he says Jake Sully will go first, and it's this like little moment of pride and battle. Like he wants Jake to go first in order for him to fail. And then there's also just between Grace and the Colonel, whenever Grace says anything, it's as if the Colonel's not listening. And although it may be because they have opposing views, because the Colonel is so much more for action, whereas Grace is for delegation and sort of talking things out, I think it definitely plays in that she is a woman and that he won't necessarily take her words into consideration, and he's not really eager to listen to her point of view. And then in the Gallagher Part 1 article, there's a quote that says, "Masculinity is a product of culture. The attributes and behaviors that signify it shift over time and are constantly under negotiation," which ties directly to the next quote being, "In contemporary films, blue screen, green screen, and digitally stimulated action sequences literally separate their male stars from their surrounding environments." And this just makes me think directly to the shot where Jake is in the foreground and he's riding the Turuk and he's huge and he's over the Na'vi people and he's on this giant creature, and the shot scale really signifies his power over, not necessarily over the Na'vi people, but in comparison to them, because they're all sort of helpless around the mother tree, and he comes in swooping in on this big Turuk, and I don't know, it just communicates such power to me, and that shows his masculinity compared to when he's in his human form or when he's getting ready to go into the Avatar, and he's often shot in low angles, and he only cares about his avatar form. He stops bathing and eating in his human form because his human form is weak, it's emasculated, and he doesn't care for it anymore. It's like he's not even living in that form anymore. He's only living through his avatar form. And that also makes me think of when he says that he has to finish this, when the colonel says, okay, it's time to come out, you've done what we asked you to, you need to stop, because he's getting sort of caught up in the whole Na'vi culture. And he says, well, I have to complete the final stage of becoming a man. And he won't pull out until he completes this step, and it makes me think that it's not only because he wants to complete the journey that he's on, but also to complete his manhood. And in addition to that, to reference the smell of burning ants, it says that boys are robbed of femininity, and that makes me think about how much pride they have naturally from the beginning, and they have natural urges to compete, just like Sute and Jake are always competing even without voicing like, oh, well, we're in battle right now. Like they're, until the end, until they finally realize that they are brothers, they're constantly competing against each other. And then it makes me think of, in Smell of Burning Ants, it says, he learns early of the power and protection of the mob. And that, to me, that sentence the mob could easily be replaced with anything that exemplifies masculinity, like joining the army, or the Marines, I guess, for Jake, was that he had offered him protection. So that is also an exemplification of masculinity, I guess. And another thing that sort of was overlying throughout the film was the diegesis that signified masculinity and power, like, throughout. So there were different sound cuts that would happen before a big battle that would signify, like, okay, power is coming before us, or like the difference between when the Na'vi people are running compared to when the big ships and the choppers and the guns are coming down, like, and then even just the sound cut between when Jake and Neytiri are kissing and it goes straight to the choppers, just like that peaceful Na'vi approach. You know, they collect all the animals, they get all of the people together to fight with their bows and their arrows, and then the sound cut directly to like bullets and the chopper and the gun, like just the difference in power between the Na'vi people and the human race is incredible. So I think that's that.